It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 293 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction, as you know. Also, we have with us my usual co-host, Mr. Nice Guy, also known as Mr. Lam Galuka, stand-up comedian, stand-up guy. But on this episode 293, the addition of one more nerd for this pod, and that would be Spennis the Menace, resident Pokemaster, half of the recording duo for Ruckus and the Menace podcast, a podcast all about sports. Spennis is no menace here, just a good friend and a fantastic person to have with us as we discuss the games of this past year. But before we get started, my dudes, anything to plug?
Yes. The first major piece that I am going to plug, obviously, are the weekly podcasts, which are on pretty much Tuesdays during the day is when Ruckus generally will release those on YouTube, Spotify, multiple podcast outlets. But we have been doing a YouTube series, each of us individually, but it's been combined all into one, for the Super Bowl race while playing Madden 24. Ruckus has been with the Los Angeles Chargers, while I have done Duval Nation and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Our season finales are a 2-week special, where my finale is this Friday. Next Friday will be Ruckus's as we conclude our series. So if you haven't caught up, go to the Ruckus and the Menace YouTube channel. My Super Bowl is against the Dallas Cowboys, while Ruckus is playing the Atlanta Falcons in his. Get yourselves ready to play some Madden, or at least watch some Madden anyway.
Nice. And where can people find that, Spennis? Like, what's the channel where people can find that?
Just search Ruckus and the Menace on YouTube, and it will show up as an R&M logo for you guys, and that's where you also can keep tabs with every single episode of the Ruckus and the Menace Sports Podcast, so you can hit the subscribe button and you don't miss an episode.
Awesome. It is thrilling to have you back for another Game of the Year discussion. And as a lover of sports ball, I of course understood all of the words that you said in your plug. So thank you. But it's good to have you back for another Game of the Year discussion. This is our fourth time that we have joined together to talk about all the biggest games of the past year. And as somebody who doesn't really play the AAA titles usually, I am just so grateful to have you two serious gamers here to help walk me through it. Obviously, not everything's gonna make our top 5, so we need to make room for some honorable mentions. Are we ready? Are we ready and psyched for the honorable mentions this year, my dudes?
Yep.
I'm hyped. Let's go.
Yes. Spennis, as our guest, I'd like to throw to you first. You have some honorable mentions before we hit our top 5 of the year. Tell us, what have you got going?
I have divided these honorable mentions into 3 specific things. The first one I'm putting in the honorable mention list is Diablo 4. Very good RPG game that does its great job of heaven versus hell concepts, with none to unreasonable graphics and presentation for the game, and a mechanical structure that was neither an eyesore nor difficult to execute just about everything it was needed. But what kept it out of the top 5 was a very strong AAA environment that came along with it. The grindfest of seasons definitely took away from what Diablo 4 could have been, especially with the previous Diablo games not necessarily having that. So it's like, oh, you have a certain amount of time, then you gotta reset and do this again with another character. No, that is not what you need to be doing. Just especially because that game is long and you got to have a little bit of commitment equity to it in order to do that. I think a lot of games this year took too much of the commitment time. My second game on the honorable mention list is Hogwarts Legacy. This game got no accolades. None. But it had a very good concept of oh, you want to be a wizard in Harry Potter? Granted, without Quidditch? This is the right game to have that experience. And it does an excellent job of this. But some sound design issues. The voices sound canned. It sounded like you were inside a can. I also wrote here being trapped inside of a fishbowl. But the experience was great. But the game just did not deliver on those presentation fronts to be able to push itself into the Game Awards recognition.
Yeah.
So Hogwarts Legacy, I know, came out much earlier in the year than a lot of the things that we saw. Do you think those issues you identified were big enough, or do you think it was just that bit combined with the recency bias that we know that we get in Game Awards?
It was big enough to keep it out, but realize that also the AAA market and even the AA market, which we really don't have a true name for the higher scale indies, and so I've been calling that the AA. Even the AA's have been good.
You agree?
It's been a great year for games.
But my third category is smaller game darlings. And this kind of went along with 4 games. Cocoon, Sea of Stars, Venba, and Hi-Fi Rush. All 4 took different art styles, different game types, and different elements and excelled. So I couldn't put one over the other. Cocoon, a modern graphically 3D puzzle adventure. Sea of Stars, a 16-bit turn-based RPG. Venba, a narrative-based cooking game with a very unique graphic style centered about the Tamil culture. And then Hi-Fi Rush, rhythm mechanics-based action game. All of them got nominations, and some of them even picked up victories at the Game Awards. But the small game gems not making it to the top 5, just the nature of the beast that comes with this list.
Yeah.
An indie has to just flat out floor you
100%.
just to even make it in there. Has it happened before? Yes. Have mobile games gotten there? Yes. This year, it just was not one of them.
Stiff competition, man.
I have a couple other tiers, but do you want me to wait on the?
Maybe we dive in a little bit and then come back to those. You know what I mean, Mac? Is it cool if I do 2 honorable mentions real quick and then we dive into our top 5? What do you think? You're the host today.
No, I love the proposal, but yeah, let's hold off on the Game of Shame and the and that other one for later, just before we hit number 1.
Yep.
Mr. Naskai, what honorable mentions have you got?
Yeah, so I only had 2 that I really wanted to mention, and I feel like both of these games deserve some recognition. One is a AAA title, one is an indie game. The AAA title is It's Starfield, and as we know, made by Bethesda, makers of Fallout, makers of Elder Scrolls. They have the money, the resources, the time to put out really good games. This was an Xbox PC exclusive. It really didn't hit the mark in terms of certain aspects, particularly things like the encumbrance system, things like the menu navigation, things like the travel between planets. They touted it as a huge game with lots of exploration, and it was. But some of the navigation was such a tedious factor that it made it a frustration to play. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to play this on Game Pass, so I didn't drop $70 on it. And even then, as much as I love Fallout and Elder Scrolls, I did not finish this game. But I had a good time with it, and I think it's good enough in terms of combat, in terms of story, in terms of breadth, that it deserves to be mentioned in this conversation, even though it did not make my top 5. The other game that I want to mention very quickly, and keep in mind, listeners, Mac and I did an Indie Game of the Year episode last week. That was indies specifically that we played, that we got codes for. Please go listen to that, episode 292. This indie that I want to mention is one we did not get a code for, but I played via Game Pass, and that is Planet of Lana. Now, I'm a sucker for games like Limbo, Inside, side-scrolling games where you're dropped into a world and there's some puzzle platforming. You have to figure out what your character needs to do in order to escape. This is a game that has a 9 out of 10 rating on Steam, but I feel really flew under the radar. I liked that this was pick up and play. You could get through a couple puzzles and get to a checkpoint very quickly. It worked great on the Steam Deck. It was on Game Pass, so I didn't have to shell out $20 for it. But also, it was just a beautiful game. The puzzles weren't too complicated, but they did make me feel smart. Like, you can't just, force your way through the game. You have to use your noggin, and I liked that. I think that the storytelling without voice acting was brilliant. And this is a game that I think if you're into Limbo, if you're into Inside, if you're into, what's that zombie game we played back in the day, Mac, that we interviewed the devs at E3?
Deadlight.
Yeah, if you're into Deadlight, that type of game, I think that you would like Planet of Lana. And also, I think you can beat it in 5 hours. So in a year that is one of the best years of gaming, we need more games like this that are bite-sized, great experiences. Shout out to Planet of Lana. Those are my two.
Lovely. Fantastic.
He has struck one of the two things.
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you go ahead and throw that one out there since it's already been relieved? Let's hear what you have to say about it.
Unfortunately, nice guy, you struck the bad one.
Really?
You struck the game of shame.
No way.
I have put Starfield there.
Oh, got it.
Bethesda, tisk, tisk, tisk. You have brought all this hype to Starfield. I really wanted to play this, and it flopped and fell hard on its face. I have no desire for Fallout type games. Don't get me wrong, an RPG is great, but I just do not have any appeal for anything that's like Fallout. And I really wanted Starfield to maybe be not as much like Fallout. I really wanted Starfield to be something a little more faster pace.
Okay.
They feel too slow for my appeal. I mean, granted that I do have some slow pace games in my top 5 for certain cases or certain longer.
And I'm going to call you out on it when we get to them.
But Starfield, just even with me playing it, granted I did it through the PC Game Pass, I just couldn't get impressed with it. Like, I couldn't get impressed with it even with the bit that I did get into. I just could not shake the slow pace of it.
Fair enough.
So I guess we have, just in our own little microcosm of the world ourselves, we see the mixed reviews that Starfield is currently famous for. I think it's about time for us to start moving toward our top 5, but first, we're talking about the best games of the year. Let's not forget the worst games of the year, though. Gentlemen, I would like to read to you some excerpts from a review of a certain game and see if we can figure out what game it was that got such shade. This first one from Kotaku, quote, "I died twice in the stealth action game and in real life as I laughed at the ridiculousness of it all." Second quotation, this one from IGN, quote, "Creative works generally exist for a reason. Sometimes it's to delight, other times it's to inform, or it makes you think with interesting ideas that challenge you and consider to reflect. This, however, is a game that does none of those things." So, think it over, gentlemen. What game released this year do you think those things were said about?
Oh, released this year.
This year.
Okay. So it's obviously a stealth action game, or at least it has some stealth aspects to it.
Yep.
One game that I know that was stealth, and this could be describing, is Deceive Inc. And I had actually got a copy of that via Humble Bundle, and I've only played it a little bit. It seems to be getting some critical acclaim. And so I don't know that that is the game, but just based on the description, that would be my guess. Spennis, what are your thoughts? Any guesses?
It's tough to try and figure out because I didn't really play a lot of the bad stuff in 2023. Remember how I said I went quality over quantity?
Yeah.
This is why I went quality. I went quality that kind of avoided this. I would have loved some of these, maybe more so to be in kind of the timeline like we did last year, where it was push it back a little bit. But honestly, I probably would have rolled the same way with Deceive Inc.
Okay.
All right. With our answers locked in, the correct answer was Lord of the Rings Gollum.
Oh, Gollum! That was a big AAA game that also fell hard on its face. I didn't play it.
I didn't play that either.
Well, it looks like we dodged a bullet because it's none of the creative reasons why creative works exist. Well, with that, let's turn to some good stuff. Gentlemen, Spennis, please, what was your game number 5 for this year?
To kick off this, let's turn the clock back to what some people call kind of the last remaining months of normal times. In November of 2019, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was released. I didn't initially have much interest in it and picked it up a little bit later, but because it was released in 2019, Jedi Fallen Order just missed the 2020 line for the first ever Game of the Year. So ranking the first release in Respawn's storyline of Star Wars franchise games never was able to be done. 4 years and a sequel release later, we finally get it. My number 5 game is Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
Nice.
As we journey through with Cal Kestis once again, the story carries a much heavier tone, much like a trilogy arc does. Example, Last of Us Part 2. We have another game later that kind of takes this tone. But for the Souls-like elements of Jedi Survivor are very much like Fallen Order, where it doesn't feel like it's... There's elements of a Souls-like, but it's not as brutal of a Souls-like experience. And you have various different combat styles, more creative ways to defeat enemies and bosses. The twists and turns of the story make it an amazing experience to play. This game was very solid for me. I kind of put it in that, like, a very great experience to just sit and do. And you also have good pacing with save points where it's like, oh, I could sit and play for about a couple of hours, get to a save point, step away from it, come back, and feel like I didn't miss much.
Fantastic. Mr. Nice Guy, how about you? What have you got for your number 5 pick this year?
So my number 5 is one that I did not expect to make my list when the year started, even though I knew that it was going to come out. It's a type of game that I have kind of strayed away from as I've gotten older and just haven't been interested in as much. But the retro gamer in me gave it a shot, and I ended up loving this game. And that game is Super Mario Wonder on the Nintendo Switch, obviously. Now, the thing that I really liked about Super Mario Wonder, and one of the things that made me pick it up, is I read an article, and I'm going to read a portion of it here. This is on multiplatform.com, written by Anastasia Palvanista. Super Mario Bros., the game that launched in 1985 and became a global phenomenon, was crafted by a team of merely 5 individuals. Fast forward 38 years to 2023, and the release of Super Mario Bros. Wonder reveals an astonishing detail. 4 out of those 5 original creators played a pivotal role in the development of the latest title. And while there has been no confirmation about the 5th member's current status at Nintendo, their last credited work was in 2019. No retirement announcement has been made thus far. So I think it's very, very cool that people who worked on the original Super Mario Bros. Back in 1985, 4 of the 5 of them worked on Wonder, and that inspired me to pick it up. Now, I like platformers as much as the next 30-something-year-old older millennial, but the new Super Mario Bros. Line of games has kind of bored me over the years. Giving this one a shot, I'm really, really glad that I did. They didn't try to overdo it with gimmicks, but they did add little quality of life changes and add enough new things that kept me interested. For example, each level has a star rating to give you information on how difficult it's going to be. Many of the levels have multiple different routes you can take to end the level. You got to find that secret route to unlock some stuff. And there's different things that you can collect throughout the level, little wonder seeds, much similar to Mario 64 or Mario Galaxy, where there are things that you need to collect in order to unlock future worlds, future levels. So I really, really liked that aspect. The one thing I will say about this game is that it left me wanting more, but it was not challenging. Like, I can't sit here and tell you that Super Mario Wonder is a hard game, like Mario Odyssey, or like a Mario 3D World. There were challenges with platforming, but they were things that I could generally get done pretty simply. I never got a game over the whole time I was playing this game, and I never went to the shop and bought extra lives. So I think that's telling that I could get enough lives without having issues. And that's become a problem in recent history. Nintendo just gives you access to too many lives in their games. You don't get game overs like you used to as a kid. Last thing I'll say about this is Nintendo has got to move to being a little bit more self-aware in terms of their level design, because we now live in a world where people are modding, making their own levels, and candidly, with things like Super Mario Maker, are making Mario levels that are much, much more challenging, much, much more interesting than some of the levels that were in this game. The story in Mario is why nobody plays it, or I should say no one plays it for the story. But the story was fine. You know, it's Bowser and you're trying to beat him at the end. Princess wasn't kidnapped this time. But you're just trying to get through that. And so I would say on a pure nostalgia level and on a fun level, that is why this game made my top 5. Shout out to Nintendo for making me feel like a kid again. I had fun with this.
That's fantastic. I had
I'm holding.
actually one of the things that I had over Christmas was a chance to play a little bit of Switch with my nephews, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder is one of the games that I got a chance to try out. And here I thought that all that easiness was just right on the front end. Gentlemen, thank you for your number 5 picks. How about we try another game released this year?
Let's do it.
I have a couple of quotes. Quote, "To be clear, I haven't completed this game. In truth, I haven't got very far at all. The biggest reason for this is that the save function on my review copy stopped working. All attempted repairs were fruitless, as was reinstalling the game." End quote.
Oh, wow.
That's from Rock, Paper, Shotgun. And this one from Destructoid. The problem with the game isn't merely that it is buggy, sometimes to a hilarious degree. Instead, the main issue is that even if the bugs weren't present, it still wouldn't be worth its current price tag. From Destructoid.
Ooh, that could be a few games.
It could be.
Go first, Spennis. What do you think?
I've got a third one if you feel like you could use one more quote to help suss it out.
I don't think it hurts.
I want it. Those first two could be about a lot of games.
This one came from IGN, quote, "Poorly presented, sloppily executed, and absolutely lousy with progress stalling bugs. I'm not sure you could have a more unpleasant experience than this, even if you dropped all the acid at Woodstock."
Okay, what do you think, Spennis?
I almost went. Ugh, I didn't catch a lot of the bad this year, so this is a little tough. I probably would have guessed Lord of the Rings Gollum on this one, had we not gone over it already.
I'm trying to remember if Starfield was buggy at launch. I don't remember it being super buggy. Just for the sake of time, though, I kind of want to go with Starfield.
Okay. The correct answer was Flashback 2.
Okay. Didn't play that one.
I didn't play that one either.
It had a lot of hype, it being a follow-up to Flashback, but yeah, just really, really missed the mark, as you can tell from those reviews.
Yeah,
okay, Enough bad. Let's get back to the good. Spennis, tell us, what was your number 4 game?
My number 4, I'm probably going to get crucified for this, simply because it rated so highly, but despite great story, solid gameplay that builds successfully off of the last one, new mechanics which bring creativity and a new wrinkle to what makes the game great. My summer had a little bit of a tough part of time investment, so I didn't really get to feel like I really have the energy to play it. But I had to put it on here because everything that I was doing, I was really enjoying it as well. And that is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That game, basically compared to a lot of those other Legends of Zelda games, feel like it doubled in size. The game was phenomenal. Heck, even Elden Ring, as great as it was, did not even sniff my top 5. Legend of Zelda is an incredible franchise and one of Nintendo's best in terms of sales, quality of games, and far and away has brought Nintendo many a game award.
Testify.
However, what makes it not as captivating for me here in this was just the pace. There are Zelda games that feel like you go at a faster pace than this. And for me, who kind of gets rather limited amounts of time, prioritizing time with my wife and prioritizing time to other areas that I commit to, it was too much of a time sink for me to place it higher. The game checks all the boxes, and it came away with the best action adventure game, stealing it away from Spider-Man 2 and Alan Wake 2, but I didn't finish the game due to just not having really the time commitment and I've mentioned time commitment before in talking about Diablo 4. I was enjoying this more than Diablo 4.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've know people have mentioned this in the past, but like, we're getting old, fellas, and I think at some point in time we're going to need somebody to finally implement that. Hey, you're an old busy person, so when you start up the game, we will give you a quick recap of all the story beats and a reminder of your current objectives.
Right.
And any open world game like Tears of the Kingdom is going to be hard to sit down and dedicate that time to if you're a busy man like Spennis is. Mr. Nice Guy, tell us, my good man, what about yours pick?
Yeah, so my number 4 pick is a game that I got into later in the year, far after it had already released, but I'm super glad that I did. And I got to try it as part of a free weekend, went through the first 20 levels or whatever I was able to do as part of the free weekend, and then realized, you know what, I got to pick this game up because I want to keep playing it. If you know me, you know that one of my favorite N64 games of all time is Gauntlet Legends. And I've been searching for a long time for a dungeon crawler that's an adult version of that with a little bit more depth, with a little bit more to do and some more attention to detail. And so my number 4 pick this year is Diablo 4. I had a blast with this game, and it was supplemented by the fact that it's very, very playable on the Steam Deck. So I could pick it up, I could play it somewhere as long as I had internet connection, and I could get in, a quest or two when I had a few, free 20 minutes, 30 minutes to play without having to sit in front of my TV. I really, really like the armor system. I like the leveling system. I like the amount of different types of attacks that you can do and the fact that there's so many different types of classes that you can pick from to suit your playstyle. So Diablo 4, as I've read reviews about it, people have said, this is a game that's meant for parents, mothers, and fathers that are busy, who aren't necessarily looking to min-max their character, and get all the stats exactly where you want them, but people who just want to have some fun, get in, get out, armor up. It's very clear if you pick up a piece of gear if it's going to be better than what you had before, and go to battle. Now, the one thing I didn't get to experience in this game is multiplayer. I've played it single player thus far, and I would love to get a group of people who want to go do some quests, who want to go do some dungeons, as I think that would greatly enhance the experience. But the level of polish in this game, the level of attention to detail, the story was fine. I'd give it a B-. But just the amount of pure fun that I could have leveling up my guy, customizing it to look the way that I want, and then going and battling demons just made me feel like a kid again, and I got to give a shout out to Diablo 4. Great job.
I mean, it's good enough it even made, at the very least, the honorable mentions for Spennis, so fantastic. I would love to be there for you, Mr. Nice Guy, and be a part of the crew, but we know my internet is run off of a potato, and the data packets are sent on the back of sheep. Well, before we get to our game number 3 picks, take it to the bad, the dark side once again. Gentlemen, this one from Tech Radar. Quote, this title has an original premise and story, but is let down by weird, over-the-top cinematic stylings, as well as odd pacing, as well as characters and dialogue carved out of wood. And IGN said, the best modern example I can think of when it comes to a game that attempts to do so much and yet fails at almost all of it.
I'm not cheating, but I'm looking up the release date of a game to see if it can be the game that I'm thinking.
My problem is that Hogwarts Legacy was such a good game that when they were talking about the sound design, I was thinking that route, but Hogwarts Legacy got good reviews.
Yeah, when was Forsaken released? Or Forspoken
Forspoken.
released? Was that this year?
Yes, Forspoken was this year.
I am going to go with Forspoken, just based on reviews that I read of it previously. Because it has originality, but it just dropped the ball in a lot of areas, so much so that I didn't even bother with it.
I also am going with Forspoken.
All right, Mac.
It's a good thing you guys have been avoiding the bad, because I wouldn't have wished this or any of the others on any of you. This was Quantum Error. Did you guys even hear anything about Quantum Error by chance?
I did not, no.
Absolutely not.
Very much a shooter, cosmic horror game that came out, and it had big ideas, but just tried to do a lot and really didn't succeed at any of it. The one thing that was interesting, I wanted to include this, but I figured it would give it away. One of the quotes about it was like, the only thing that works in this game is when you are trying to fight fires, because in Quantum Error you're like a firefighter, and so sometimes you actually have to like put out fires in an area, and that's the one thing that people agree actually works about the game. Everything else, the shooters, the ideas, everything else just doesn't work, and it came out in October of this year, so relatively recent. Anyway, enough of the bad. Let's get back to the good. What have we got for our number 3 picks, Spennis?
My number 3. I said if you played both the first one and Miles Morales, you got to experience the immersive and wonderful feeling of traversing New York City. And these sequences still to this day, and the enjoyment of swinging around, never get old, as you can still do the tricks that make it entertaining. Also on top of that, it also brought some of the best story and narrative and a much more par for the course tone in the trilogy arcs, and kind of also that two-sided storyline that has been a common trend of Sony products. Last of Us Part 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, God of War Ragnarok, and it's Spider-Man 2.
Nice.
Still possesses the solid mechanics and the agile style that Spider-Man carries. Both Peter and Miles play similar, but not so much the same that there's a lack of variety in terms of what abilities they may have. What puts Spider-Man over Jedi Survivor, especially in the action-adventure genre for me, is the dimensions the story was willing to go.
No spoilers. No spoilers for our audience.
And the great depth and power of the narrative that is brought to the table here. I think that basically while Star Wars Jedi Survivor was able to push the dark turns in terms of betrayal, there were a lot of deeper elements and a lot more things that the Spider-Man franchise could bring together, leaving it open for a third game. Insomniac's got a really good journey ahead of it, and Yuri Lowenthal is an amazing voice actor for the Peter Parker Spider-Man. But what prevents Spider-Man 2 from getting much higher up my board is the other 2 games above it did more things for me to make themselves stand out. As Spider-Man 2 does feel super repetitive and yeah, I already did a lot of the exploring around the city in the first game. Kind of switch it up a little bit. Spider-Man 2 also left the Game Awards empty-handed.
Well, that's all right, because PlayStation did their own Game of the Year just for Spider-Man 2, it seems. Shout out to Ishmobile who posted that little fun joke in the Discord.
That's right.
I'm okay with it sitting at the number 3 slot for 2023 simply because it just was a great, like, it really was great in terms of its storytelling. I did not unveil the major spoiler. I'm sure you've gotten far enough that you know what's coming. Right, Lom?
I haven't said if I've played this game or not yet, so let's hold off.
Mr. Nice Guy, what about you? What takes space number 3 for you?
Yeah, so my number 3 is a game that, it's interesting. As we talked about Indie Game of the Year last week, I was like, if we were really talking about best indie game I played this year, it's probably this one. Even though we were blessed, you and I, Mac, to be able to play some great indies, this is a AAA indie, and it's one that's made by a studio that has made other successful games in the past. It's a turn-based RPG, which I'm typically not really into. I'm not really a Fire Emblem person. I don't like the JRPGs. But this one was almost reminiscent of Mario RPG in terms of some of the game mechanics and even a little bit in the storytelling. And that game is Sea of Stars. Now, some of you may remember, I believe it was 2018, when this developer came out with The Messenger. And The Messenger was more of a not a puzzle platformer. It was a Ninja Gaiden style platformer with a really, really good sense of humor. And they just knocked it out of the park. So much so that they decided to make this as a follow-up in the same universe. Shout out to Sabotage Studio. This game brought a smile to my face. It's on Game Pass, so I was able to play it there. And there's three main characters, I should say, who are on a journey to do different things. And it tackles a lot of different areas of life in terms of the storytelling. It tackles friendship. It tackles betrayal. It tackles pain and suffering that you see others experience and how you can help them. And for a 16-bit designed game, the amount of depth was just extremely impressive. The levels are not on rails, so it's not open world, but it's also not guiding you where you need to go. There is a certain amount of exploration. There are secrets that you can find. There's side quests that you can do. And the amount of humor in the writing is really what brought this over for me. Typically, these types of games are pretty simple. This one is just phenomenal, and it's one of those games that when I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. I'd be playing it on a Saturday, and I'd be like, wow, I just sunk 2 hours into this, and I need to go be more responsible and mow the lawn or be a dad or whatever it is. Sea of Stars is a game that for people who like retro-style RPGs, turn-based RPGs, I think it's a must-play. I really, really liked that as you're attacking people, that they have that mechanic where you can press the button to stack your attacks and do multiple bounces off the head of an enemy in order to get more damage. And the amount of strategy that goes into beating these bad bosses was enough to make me feel like I was good at video games without me feeling frustrated, like in Elden Ring. So shout out to Sea of Stars. I hope that they make another game in this franchise, and I love this one.
Awesome.
I think Sea of Stars is a great game. I couldn't put it up any higher due to just the crowding.
It's cool.
Any other year, I think I could have put Sea of Stars up much higher. Had I caught it earlier and had this PC built earlier, I wouldn't have had half of these problems.
As somebody who has to hold off on a lot of AAAs just because of hardware constraints, I feel that deep in my heart and soul.
You're making excuses because you have a Steam Deck now. You can play some of these AAAs, dog. Some of them.
Some of them, yes. Well, before we turn to our number 2 game, how about our number 2 bad game of the year? Gentlemen, Gamer Escape said of this title, "Every minute I played this game was just a reminder that I needed to play through Metroid Prime Remastered." While IGN said, "What the phrase quantity over quality would look like if it were turned into a video game."
That's so tough, man. And like Spen has said, I played a lot of games this year, but I didn't play the bad ones. And I didn't play some of the good ones. And so it's really hard to guess what this could be. So, I guess we got to throw something out there.
I think I'm going to throw Starfield.
I'm going to go really random, and I don't think that this was a bad game, but I do think it's one that maybe wasn't needed. And that was the Metal Gear Remastered collection. I don't think that's the right answer, but just the references this person is making in terms of I should have played this other remastered game instead. I don't know. I'm going to go with that.
Well, the game that did not review well was Testament: The Order of High Human, which was a Metroidvania it was a single-player action-adventure game, kind of RPG and Metroidvania in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, but it's a shame to see something with a different take on a setting flop so hard, because we really need more than just first person shooters. And I feel like this did nothing to help the post-apocalyptic first person fantasy subgroup. So alas. Well, enough bad stuff. Let's get back to the good. Our number 2 picks, our penultimate choices in Game of the Year. Spennis, what have you got for us?
Number 2 for me is a game that has already been mentioned. And this next game, I am speaking under normal genre circumstances, just looks like a timeless classic repeated all over again. Yet the innovative twists on the classic and the enjoyment of being able to play on your own, a couch with a friends, or over at a friend's house can even be done online with your friends on your own couches. Number 2 for me is Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
Nice.
Remember a certain element that was in previous Mario Brothers games, that something called a timer? The timer has been scrapped.
Yeah, that's right.
So the classic get to the right to the sides platformer gets the number 2 spot, stealing it away from your stereotypical favorites like Tears of the Kingdom and Spider-Man 2. What is this Joker thinking? So let's start with the roots of where the game began. You kind of go right through the Mushroom Kingdom, get to the top of the flagpole, score points, and beat a timer. The timer's scrapped. The standard premise also story remains the same fundamentally. Save the kingdom from Bowser. Okay, we've kind of done this about 1,000 times before. Why do we even need to play this game? The answer lies on things beyond just the surface level of thinking. Of simply saying, oh, this is Super Mario Brothers with a new skin, bunch of fancy new mechanics, designed to dumb it down for kids to be able to enjoy this game like we old heads did. Some of the dumbing down is allowing you to be able to bring the next generation in. Set them up as a Yoshi or a Nabbit that don't really take damage, and let them enjoy a level. Innovations and power-ups. I mean, you can do more than shoot fireballs, fly, or even climb like a cat. There's an elephant, there's a drill now, and there's levels that are designed to take advantage of these set pieces. It was the second level of the game where I was playing as Mario, and there were a bunch of singing piranha plants. And even my wife got a chuckle out of it. This is not only something that can appeal to just us as the hardcore, but maybe people who are not as versed in the gaming universe, in just seeing this and getting a laugh out of it. Or there are things that, yeah, you could do this with Super Mario Maker, but at the same time they do something with enough of a creative element that it still feels like it brings the wonder and be able to and bring people in. If you want people to play your game, Nintendo does a great job of setting a good gateway entry point.
Yeah.
Mario Wonder won the Best Family Game at the Game Awards, rightfully so. Bringing in people to be able to play this game.
I mean, Mario was definitely an entry point for so many of us. I'm glad that it's a good entry for others. And, I certainly cracked up with those piranha plants on the second level. That was hilarious. Mr. Nice Guy,
Yeah.
you've got a number 2 pick for us as well, don't you, sir?
Yeah, so my number 2 pick is one that Spedis mentioned earlier, and that's Spider-Man 2. I liked one thing you mentioned earlier, Spedis, which is that Sony Studios has done a good job, or not Sony Studios, but PlayStation games in general that are exclusive have done a good job of creating the buddy system. The Last of Us, God of War, 2 characters on the same journey with different strengths, but they have some type of bond together. We saw it with Joel and Ellie. We saw it with Kratos. And, oh my gosh, what's his son's name? Atreus.
Yep.
Yeah, and we've seen it with Ratchet and Clank and others. And we see it here with Miles and Peter, and also other people, right? So it's, I mean, some say that it's more of the same, and I would agree. In terms of innovation, there wasn't a lot that they did other than adding some quality of life, adding some new moves, changing the controls a little bit. The one thing that really makes this a super immersive experience for me is the DualSense controller.
Agreed.
If Nintendo, and this is one thing you didn't mention, but I almost feel like Nintendo, yes, they have vibration on their controller. In fact, to play some of these Nintendo games that I've played this year, I bought some Binbach controllers that are a little bit more comfortable. But the PlayStation controller has levels of vibration, has levels of just jittery vibration, has the touchpad that you can use to swipe and do different actions. And then because of the tension that's available in the trigger buttons, it feels very immersive when you're swinging through the city or when you're doing a puzzle where you have to put a certain amount of pressure. When someone shakes your hand and you just barely feel the controller shake a little bit. Little things like that make the game so much more immersive. Now, I do have Chiaki set up on my Steam Deck, so I can play my Steam Deck remotely. It's not the same as playing it with a DualSense controller or on the PlayStation Portal, which, by the way, I did get a PlayStation Portal. I'm guilty. I caved. And you know what? I don't regret getting it because when my kids are on the larger TV and when I want to play some PlayStation games and I don't want to sacrifice and miss out on that immersiveness of the DualSense.
Boo this man.
It's a super cool thing to have. Yes, it's more of the same, but I will say this. Marvel doesn't let people touch their brand unless what they are putting out is going to be quality. Have there been bad Marvel movies? Sure. But in terms of recent memory and the games that are coming out, they've all been good, and this one falls into that category. The Miles Peter duo and being able to switch between them, go live their different lives, very, very different stages of life, very different backgrounds, but within the same city, is super cool. And I really, really enjoyed this game. It's my number 2. Must play.
That was a very nice touch that you definitely didn't get with the first one, the DualSense controller, but because it was on PlayStation 4. Like I said, there were a lot of things that made it more unique.
Yeah, great game.
Well, one last bad game to bring us down just before we ascend to those heights. I've only got one quote from Enemy Magazine about this game. A subpar shooter that is diminished by the money spent on licensed music and stunt cast voice acting. You can see good ideas let down by poor writing, woeful shooting, and a game that feels like all of its cash was spent on Chuck Norris one-liners instead of making a game stand on its own. Quick, gentlemen, what's your guess?
Dude, so far all of the games have been stuff I've never heard of.
Yeah, I'm at that point.
Except for Gollum.
Except for Gollum, yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, did Overwatch 2 come out this year? Is there any... was that last year?
That was around October of last year, but that was just
Okay.
almost like a reskin of the original.
Right.
It wasn't like it really mattered much.
Yeah, and I don't know any games that had licensed music this year that were shooters, so... I don't know, Mac. Is there a third quote?
I could, but I don't think as any of them would be more dispositive. So
Yeah,
I'll
what do
just
you think,
give
Spence?
it to you. I'm pretty sure you didn't play it.
Okay. I honestly have no idea, based on the fact that
I
it's a
have no
shooter.
idea either.
This game was published by 505.
Oh.
Does that mean you got a guess for me, Spennis?
I don't have a ring on it.
All right. In March, by 505, Crime Boss, Rock K City, which was, basically a first-person shooter that came from, you'd say it came from good stock, but my gosh, nobody liked it. Okay, enough bad. Let's get to the good stuff. The thing you've all been waiting for. Spennis, tell us. What's the number one? What is the game of the year for you?
Before we go into our number ones, this is where we're going to go. We're going to have a small little archive time.
Okay.
In 2020, Nice Guy chose Half-Life Alyx. I chose The Last of Us Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
In 2021, Lom, though he wants to shift it to Metroid Dread, he set it to Halo Infinite.
Good memory.
I had It Takes Two. And then in 2022, we both ended up matching. I feel like this year, none of our games matched at all,
Right.
minus a couple games here. But for me, my game of the year, and it holds a special place for me for 2023 because this year I did play more tabletop games. I played a lot more of Wizards of the Coast games with Magic the Gathering and one little game called Dungeons and Dragons. And for me, my game of the year is, and this is Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
When this game was released initially, I was not able to pick it up or play it due to preparing to be out in Nashville, Tennessee, when I got to go to the Grand Ole Opry. However, I did eventually get it, and once I got my hands on it, I start playing it and exploring, I found myself sunk into hours of play. The story is immersive, how you can kind of choose your own destiny. Rolling for checks hits and misses, persuasions, other aspects of the universe, and playing the tabletop experience is wonderful with the right people. And this even as well, with playing this video game experience of Baldur's Gate 3, it feels like you're really doing this without really having to be there with a whole bunch of dice. Whole bunch of character sheets. These are only limited to 4 people. And I really want to play more multiplayer with this. And just, if I can get the right crowd of people to do it. And Larian Studios had a banger on their hands. And they knocked it out of the park. It took best RPG, best multiplayer, and it took the top honor at both the Game Awards and the Golden Joysticks. And that for me is why I will give Baldur's Gate 3 the top honor this year. The only thing we need now is crossplay across multiple consoles to be able to really see what it can do.
Fantastic.
Nice.
As a dear lover of Dungeons & Dragons, it has filled my heart to the brim to see so many people in the video gaming sphere getting a good taste of what D&D can be like. Love that it was your number one pick. Mr. Nice Guy, what about you, sir?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I want to, before we wrap today, I got to say, I believe that 2023 is one of, if not the best year of video games ever. There are games on my list that maybe Spinnis didn't play, and vice versa. In terms of honorable mentions, in terms of games that I played that I didn't get to talk about today. And it just speaks to the fact that there's just so much good stuff out there. And so this year, as maybe it'll be a little bit slower, it'll give me a chance to go back and play some of the stuff that I missed. That said, my game of the year this year is one that I didn't think that the maker could top. But they managed to top it. They managed to add new mechanics. They managed to have a great story and great puzzles, and things that made me want to not put this game down. Without further ado, that game is Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I had so much fun with this game, and I think that part of what made someone in the chat said he's going to say NBA 2K24.
Man.
Absolutely not.
Here's some shockers. None of us really went into Final Fantasy 16,
No.
which was another banger.
No.
Alan Wake 2 missed both of our lists.
Right.
There was too much to play.
Hi-Fi Rush, like there was just so much good stuff. Now that said, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, part of what made it so enjoyable for me as a father is I went out to the midnight release, and they don't often do midnight releases anymore. So I took my 2 sons, ages 12 and 9, and we went to GameStop, and I had already pre-ordered the game, I believe, and paid for it. So we went in and we waited in line. We had some great conversations with other nerds who were there to pick it up as well. Saw some people who we knew, and just picked it up and went home, and I let them stay up late and play it. And so they played it before I even got to play it, and they beat the game before I even really had time to dive in. So once I started playing it, and I realized, oh, I'm going to build a boat so that I can get on the boat and use it to get across this river, and I'm going to use electricity to create wind machines to blow the boat across this river. Doing that and knowing that my 2 sons had already completed that just impressed me as a father with how intelligent kids are nowadays, and that they could figure out these puzzles without any help from me and without using the internet. And I think that Nintendo, by adding the ability to create machines, by adding the physics-based mechanics to this game, created something that was truly special. They didn't just do a copy and paste of Breath of the Wild and make, Legend of Zelda Skyrim Part 2. They made something that is so much far and beyond that. And I think it's such an excellent swan song to the Nintendo Switch. The other thing I like about this is that they did not release it right at the end of the generation. Often there's carryover between Zeldas. Think back to Twilight Princess. Think back to others where one will be on the GameCube.
Breath of the Wild did it.
Breath of the Wild did it too. One will be on the GameCube, one will be on the Wii, one will be on the Wii U, one will be on the Switch. And sometimes the version that comes out for the new console is lacking for that reason. And this year they didn't sacrifice. They put it on the Switch. We may get the Switch 2 in 2024, but for now, They're not holding anything back. They're not delaying it so they can sell it on both. They gave us the best game, arguably, that they've ever made, and they improved upon Breath of the Wild. The combat is phenomenal. I think that they even improved the ability to switch between weapons. There's just so much attention to detail and so much exploration. I could talk about this game for hours. Go play it if you have not. That is my game of the year.
Awesome. I would go play it, but then I'd have to own a Switch.
At least mine is on Steam.
It's true, see? But it is like, what, 150 gigs download. That's the rough part for me.
Oh, yeah, the download is definitely huge, but once you get it on there...
Yeah.
So, thanks, gentlemen, for sharing your Game of the Year picks. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Before we wrap tonight, any parting thoughts, my dudes?
2023 was a huge year with a lot of stuff. And 2024, it's going to be starting out pretty quick. Even though we had 2 fighting games come out this year with Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1, Tekken 8 comes out at the end of this month in January.
Nice.
But then I also have to make sure that I find a way to get Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. 2024, which also I believe is going to have another Hellblade game come into the mix as well. But I do think it is not going to be as loaded as it was this year.
Yeah, the parting comments that I would give is this. When you're eating a steak, a perfectly medium rare steak, you don't just shove the steak in your mouth and chew it up and eat it in 2 seconds, do you? I've never eaten a steak that way. I typically cut it up and I enjoy it. And I savor every bite. And I try to do the same thing with video games because 2023 was a year where there were too many good steaks to be able to enjoy them all. And so rather than try to enjoy every single entree that was out there, I enjoyed the ones that I had time for.
Yeah.
And I would hope that you would all do the same. You know, we review games, but we pay for them ourselves, with the exception of the indies that Mac and I get. And so don't feel like as a gamer that you have to play every single game that comes out when it is not your full-time gig. Play the games that you have time for, savor the steak, and then wait for a sale where you can pick up the ones you didn't have time for and play them then. And that's how you'll truly enjoy the art that is video games. That's my parting words today.
Or even catch them on something like a Game Pass or even where I'm now doing EA Pro as well. So I may catch a little more of the EA titles.
And for my part, just in parting, I have to say that I hope that we are always set up like this when we come to the end of a year, beginning of a new one, that there are too many good games to pick. That there are games that in other years would have been the undoubtable number one that only wind up making it to the honorable mentions because there's so much good stuff. This has been the Game of the Year conversation. Video games are art. Keep it nerdy till we catch you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye.
See ya.